Aguin Erev Shabbos. This is Gemara in Nazir Daf Yod Aleph, and we pick it up from the Mishnah on the top of Yod Aleph. Amud Aleph says the Mishnah, and again concluding a fabulous week of Daf Yomi. Shkoyach to all for learning together. Says the Mishnah, Mazgu loy es hakois. If they're pouring him a cup of wine, va'amar, and he says, "Already Nazir, I don't want the wine. I'm a Nazir." What is the halacha? Is he really a Nazir? Already Nazir mimenu, from it says the Mishnah, Hare ze Nazir. Indeed, he is a Nazir. He's not a Mishnah. There was a story. There was a woman who was a shikaira. She was a drunk. They poured her a cup of wine. And she says, just like we just saw, I am a Nazir from this wine. So we would anticipate what should the din be? Like we just saw, she is a Nazir. Amru chachamim loy niskavnu zu. She did not intend ella loy ma'arehu alai karban. She only intended to say, I'm a karban, meaning it is to me a karban, that cup of wine, meaning she didn't really intend to be a Nazir. So, of course, everyone is wondering that this story makes no sense. And that's indeed how the Gemara begins. Asks the Gemara, Maisa Listar, you're bringing down a story to contradict the din that you just said? Amrit Reisha, the Mishnah began and said, Reisa Nazir, Vader Tani, and then we learned, Maisa Bishachas, where she's not a Nazir. Alba Bahayu Daser, that only from the wine it is forbidden that it's a karban hayinach rina shari. So ask the Gemara, how do you read the simple words of the Mishnah? And the Mishnah seemingly is contradicting itself one line to the next. Answers the Gemara, chasure mechsura v'achikatani. We're missing some words in the Mishnah. If they pour so in a cup of wine, Nazir mimenu. What's the halacha? Hareze Nazir. That's part A of the Mishnah, like we anticipated. But now continues the Mishnah, and here are the words that we did not have. Ve'im shikaru. But if the person under discussion is a shikar, is a drunk, v'amar, and that person says, Harini Nazir, I am a Nazir mimenu, a noi Nazir. If such a person says he's a Nazir, the exact same story. What's the halacha? The halacha is he is not a Nazir. Says the Gemara, my time, what's the difference? The fact that he's a drunk changes his words. Says the Gemara, yes. Kiman da Amar, because we view his words as if he says, Hare alai karbanhu. We view it as if he says it's a karban. Says the Gemara, 1 second, why does he just say that? Why is he saying these funny words that it's a Nazir? Why doesn't he just say that the wine is like a karban to me? Says the Gemara, we dig into the psyche. Unfortunate peer pressure. Savar, you know what this guy thinks? If I say that this cup of wine is a karban to me, they'll bring me another cup of wine. And they're going to cause me pain. They're going to pester me. So he thinks to himself, you know what I'll say? Ha milsa tipsikalahu. I'll say this matter which is absolute. I'll say I'm a Nazir. I'll say I can't drink any more wine. And then they'll stop bringing me wine. And indeed, of course, that works. And says the Gemara, now the Mishnah continues, quoting the story with the woman that did such a case that she was a shikaira. And she said she's a Nazir when they served her the wine. And says the Mishnah, she's not a Nazir, but the wine just has the status of a karban. We continue with the Mishnah in the middle of Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Hareini Nazir al menashe shoyse yayin. Someone says, I'm a Nazir on condition that I drink wine, which of course is ridiculous, because a Nazir is one that doesn't drink wine. And he says, I'm a Nazir that I drink wine, and he says, I'm a Nazir, or that I'm also going to become Tameh to the dad, which of course is not allowed for a Nazir. What is the halacha? Says the Mishnah, Reza Nazir, V'asar Bekulan. He has a full-fledged status of a Nazir. He can't drink wine. He can't become Tameh L'meis. He said such. We'll deal with that in the Gemara. Continues the Mishnah, part B. Yoideani. The man says, I know Sheish Naziris is a concept of Naziris. I didn't know Nazir aser beyayin. Person makes himself a Nazir. He says, I knew there's this thing called Nazir, but I didn't know that a Nazir can't drink wine. What's the halacha? Says the Mishnah Arizah aser. Rav Shimon argues, and Rav Shimon is matir. Anyone that is wondering, their brain is boggling a little bit. Wait, Rav Shimon, we had something with Rav Shimon. Yes, indeed, we had Rav Shimon on Daf Gimel Amid Beis, in which Rav Shimon said that the only way one is a Nazir on the bottom of Gimel Amid Beis, said Rav Shimon, until you're Nidar Mekulam. In order to effect a Nazirus, you have to say all the things that a Nazir is forbidden to, and the Gemara will deal with that as well. And finally, the third and last case of the Mishnah, the man says, I know you can't drink wine. You know what I thought? I thought when I made myself a Nazir, I thought the Rabbanan, the rabbis, are going to be lenient with me. Why? And I'm a drunkard. I can only live with wine. So I thought I could be a Nazir and still drink wine. Or I thought that the Rabbanan know I bury the dead, so they'll allow me to do such. What's the halacha? Arizeh mutar v'Rav Shimon Aiser. And now, of course, the names flip. Why do the names flip? Obviously, is a bit of a difficult point in which we're going to deal with in the Gemara in a moment. So let's dive right into it and ask the Gemara. So we have three parts of the Mishnah. Part A of the Mishnah, I'm a Nazir, that I could drink wine, I could become Tameh. That part of the Mishnah seems to be conclusive, that he's a Nazir and he's fully Yasser. So ask the Gemara, V'liflig Nami, Rav Shimon Reisha, why doesn't, I'm just trying to look for my highlighter, there it is. We're about 20 lines on the bottom as we begin the Gemara on the bottom half of Alf Amid Aleph. Ask the Gemara, V'liflig Nami, Rav Shimon Reisha, why doesn't Rav Shimon argue in the first part of the Mishnah? Why is the first case of the Mishnah seemingly conclusive that everyone agrees that if someone says, I'm a Nazir, but I want to drink wine, I want to become Tamil Meis, that he's a Nazir and he can drink wine and he can become Tamil Meis? Why isn't Rav Shimon arguing on that case? So two terutzim. Answer number one, I'm Rav Shimon Levi. You're right. Chalakaya Rav Shimon Av Bereisha. It's true. Rav Shimon does indeed argue in that case. The Mishnah didn't mention it. But indeed, when Rav Shimon in the Mishnah says Rav Shimon Matir, says Rav Shimon Levi, that's going back on the first case, and Rav Shimon is going to hold in that case as well, that the Nazir is allowed, he's not a Nazir. Ravina Amar, says Ravina, Bareisha Leivalig Rav Shimon. Says Ravina, no, read the Mishnah straight, and Rav Shimon doesn't argue in the Reisha. My time, what's the reason? Misham dahavale masna mashe kosav atayiro. Because the first case of the Mishnah, someone says, I'm a Nazir, but I want to drink wine. I'm a Nazir, but I want to be Tamil Meis. You're making an explicit stipulation, a tenai, that runs contrary to that which the Torah itself says. And what's the rule? As we've seen many times in Shas already, Chol masna mashe kosav atayiro, tenai vatal. The Tanai is Vatal, and what you said is Kayam. So says Ravina, everyone will agree in the first case of the Mishnah that indeed this person is a Nazir. His Tanai is Vatal, because why? It runs contrary to that which the Torah says. Asks the Gemara, wait, so what does Rav Shimon Levi hold? Rav Shimon Levi, what is he going to hold? Why does Rav Shimon Levi say that Rav Shimon argues, even in the first case, seemingly that he's not a Nazir? Amr Lacha, says Rav Shimon Levi, you know what I'm going to explain to you? Rav Shimon holds, Hayal Menas Kechutz Dami. That when the first case, he says, Al Menas, I don't drink wine, he doesn't mean to make a Tanai. He doesn't mean to say, I'm making a condition against the Torah. It's as if he said, a good old-fashioned chutz, is as if he said, I'm a Nazir, except for wine. And that is the reason why Rav Shimon holds he's indeed not a Nazir. Says the Gemara, Tani Kavasi de Ravina. We have a Braisa that fits beautifully with Ravina. The Braisa says, I'm already Nazir. Al Menas. Someone says, I am a Nazir on condition. 1 second. I am a Nazir Al Menas. One more time. That I'm going to drink wine and become Tamil Meis or become Tamil Meis. Hareze Nazir. V'aser bekulam. Says the Brisa, you're a full-fledged Nazir. What do you mean? He said he wants to drink wine. He wants to dam l'meis. Mipnei, you know why? Shu masne al mashe kosa b'Torah. Because he's making a tenai against that which the Torah says. Chla masna mashe kosa b'Torah. Tenai batel. Literally a Brisa concurring exactly with the sheet of Ravina. But Rosh Shimon Levi does hold his own and says Rosh Shimon would argue even in the first case of the Mishnah. Why? Because he learns as if he says chutz. Continues the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom, Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph, the 2 dots. Yodeani shanazir aser b'yayin. Now we delve into case B and C in the Mishnah. Let's repeat what the cases were. Case number 1 was, he says, I know there's a concept of Nazir, but I didn't know that a Nazir is aser in wine. In that case, Rav Shimon says, okay, you're not a Nazir. The next case was, he says, I know that a Nazir is aser by wine, but I thought the Chachamim were going to be lenient with me because I'm a drunkard, I need wine. And in that case, Rav Shimon was machmir. Asks the Gemara, the Avi Yiskash of Amid Reisha, aser Rav Shimon matir. So what's going on? Is Rav Shimon the makel or the machmir? We have a stira from case 2 to case 3 in the Mishnah. Answers the Gemara, the classical answer, switch it up. Amar Imanami, Hareza Aser Rav Shimon Matir. The first teretz is, you're right. Switch the last few words in the Mishnah. It's not that the Tanakama's Mekel of Shimon is Machmir, but rather the Tanakama's Machmir and of Shimon is Mekel, just alike. He was Mekel in case 2 of the Mishnah. Viba Yisema says the Gemara, another answer in the last line, Lo'ilam Loi Tepach. Really, don't switch around the Shitas. So again, we're sticking to our gun. That in case number 2, Rav Shimon is Mekel. When he says, I know that there's Nazirs, I didn't know a Nazir is aser in wine. Whereas case number 3, in which Rav Shimon in which the case was, the person thought the Chacham would be Mekel, Rav Shimon is Machmir. So says the Gemara, Loi Tepach. Don't switch it around. We turn over to Yud Aleph Amud Beis, and now the Gemara explains what's the reason not to switch it around. 1 second, let's just get the words up. Here it is. Reisha, says the Gemara, in the first case, Kegain. What's the first case? It's as if that what? Reisha Kegain din Nazir Michada. The first case in the Reisha is as if he said in Naziros for only one thing. Meaning, he tried to say, I am a Nazir, I'm a Nazir, but I still want to drink wine. I didn't know that wine is forbidden. So Reisha Kigain the Nazir the Chada. And therefore, Lirabanan, according to the Rabbanan, the Amri, and this is what we referenced on Gimel Amid Beis when we read the Mishnah. Tavila Nazir Lachsmin Avi Nazir. The Rabbanan hold that even if you only said some items, you're still a full-fledged Nazir va'aser. So too in the Mishnah. The person said, I'm a Nazir, but not from wine. What's the halacha? He is a full-fledged Nazir. That is the sheet of the Tanakama. Whereas Rav Shimon, he argues, what does Rav Shimon say? That you have to articulate each and every item of a Naziros, and if not, it's not a Nazir. So Rav Shimon is going to say, Motor. That's case number 2 of the Mishnah, which we're calling the Reisha. Seifa, case number 3 of the Mishnah, which is the Seifa. Tinadir Mikulu. Really, what was the Seifa? He said, I'm a full-fledged Nazir. He just said, I thought the Chachamim were going to be Mego with me. Why? Because I need to drink wine, I need to be Metam L'meis. So in the Seifa, the Nadir Mikulu, Ve'itshol Michada. And now he's being shoyal. He's trying to release himself from one of the entities by saying, I need to drink wine, I need to be in the time of the mace. So now the halacha switches. It's not that we have a steer between the Reish and the Sefer of Shimon and the Rabbanan. It's a different case, says the Gemara. L'Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, Damri Aviloi Nazir, Elamei Achaz Me'amavi Nazir. According to the Rabbanan, it's the same shita. That even if you only say one item, you're Nazir for him, everything. So Ki Mitchell. So now it's the same thing. He was a full-fledged Nazir, but now he wants to be Shayil. So the Rabbanan hold, the Rabbanan from Daf Gimel and Beis now are extending them in this second teretz of the Gemara. And they're extending and saying the old She'ela is the same thing. Ki mitshol michada minayu ishtari. The Chachamim are going to hold that if someone is Shayil, someone petitions himself to be released from one of the items, he is released. Meaning, Just like if I have a partial Nazirus, the Chavmol, I have a full-fledged Nazirus. If I'm Shayel, if I want to release myself from part of my Nazirus, it releases himself from the entire Nazirus. That's why in the Seifa, the Chacham are going to be Mekel. Now the Rav Shimon is the same thing. Damar Achi Yazir Mikulam, says Rav Shimon, if you didn't say Nazirus from all of them, you're not a Nazir at all. So too, now you are a Nazir. But you're trying to undo your Nazirus. Ki Mitchell Nami, when you want to undo your Nazirus as well, Mahu Ad the Mitchell Mekulu. It's the same exact thing. They have to be Shayel from all of them. Mishamachi, and that's the reason Katani Rav Shimon Oiser. That's where Shimon is going to say it's Aser, because a She'ela on part will not work. Therefore, the Nazirus will stand. So the first teretz was switch up the Reisha and the Seifa, and the Seifa it's the same thing as the Reisha. Rav Shimon is always the Mekel. The second teretz is no. Rav Shimon always holds there's no such thing as part. If you want to do a part Nazirus, you're not a Nazirus at all. You want to do a part undoing of Nazirus of She'ela, you undo nothing at all, and that's where Rav Shimon will be machmir in the end of the Mishnah. Viba Yisema continues the Gemara 10 lines down. First word in line is Katani. Continues the Gemara one more time. Continues the Gemara with a third teretz. Benidre einsin kamifligi. Says the Gemara, you know what the Mishnah is discussing? A totally different topic. What is the case of a neder of an oines? An unavoidable neder, as we'll explain right now. Upulukta dishmuel v'ravasi, and the machlokes, Rav Shimon and the Chachamim in our Mishnah, according to this third teretz, is the machlokes Shmuel and Ravasi, machlokes Shmuel and Ravasi, which hopefully will sound a little bit familiar as we just had in Nedarim a few months ago. Tetanan, as we learned today, Mishnah and Nedarim. Arba Nedarim itiyu Chachamim. There are 4 types of Nedarim that the Chachamim say are not binding, and the person who makes such is released from his vow. Nidre's reason is a neder that once wants to be mizaris, he wants to push himself to do something. Nidre havai, a neder of nothingness. Nidre shagagais, a neder that he did it by mistake, unwittingly, and nidre einsim, an unavoidable neder. That is the Mishnah. And on this Mishnah comes along Shmuel and Ravasi, and they debate exactly what's going on in this Mishnah. Ve'amar Rav Yehuda, and comes along Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Asi, and he explains, Arba Nedarim Halalu, these of 4 categories, they're not Nedarim. And the person is mutter, but Surichim She'ela. Rav Asi holds are not Nedarim, but you still need to be Shayel. You still need to go to the Chacham. You still need to go to the Talmud Chacham to undo the Neder. Lechachamim. Srichad Sheila lechachamim. They need to be Shayel from a Chacham. So ki amrita kame de Shmuel. That's what Rav Asi said. They said this thing in front of Shmuel. You know what he said? Amar li Tana Katani hitiru chachamim. Said Shmuel, Amar li. When Rav Yehuda said this thing to Shmuel, Shmuel responded, Tana Katani hitiru chacham. The Tana says that the chachamim were mekel with these nedarim, which means what? It sounds like they're mekel. They're automatically undone. V'at amrin tzrichel sheila. So Shmuel argues, Shmuel says there's no din of she'ila, rather automatically it is undone. So says the Gemara, Rabbanan Savri Kishmuel. And now explains the Gemara how in our Mishnah, on the final case in which Shmuel is machmir the Chacham Mermekel, the Rabbanan know like Shmuel, who hold is an automatic implicit undoing of the neder. Why? Because it's a neder of an oines. Because it's a neder that runs contrary to himself, because he has to have one. He has to be mitam l'meis. So says Shmuel, any neder of an oines, what's the din? It blows up automatically. It's automatically undone, and that's why the Chacham in the Mishnah said on the final case it's mutter. Rav Shimon ki Rav Asi, and Rav Shimon in the Mishnah who says no, it's aser, holds like Rav Asi that what? It's true, it's a neder of an oines. It's true, it's unavoidable, but you need to be shayel with a chacham. So 3 different answers how to explain case 2 and 3 in our Mishnah. And we continue with a third Mishnah of today's share. Yud Aleph of Beis, halfway down the Amud. Says the Mishnah, Hareini Nazir ve'alai ligaleach. Someone says, I am a Nazir. Ve'alai, and it's upon me, ligaleach, to bring the karbanos when a Nazir shaves his head. What's the halacha? excuse me, va'alai ligaleach nazir. And it's about me to bring the karbanos when a nazir shaves his head. V'shama chavera, his friend here, is va'amar, and he says, ve'ani and I as well, ve'alai ligaleach nazir. And repeats as well, and I as well am going to bring the karbanos when the nazir shaves his head. So we have two people who are saying, I'm a nazir, and I want to bring the karbanos when a nazir shaves his head. Interesting statement. Says the Mishnah. We froze? We're back. Says the Mishnah. If these two people are smart, each person will bring the karban nazir at the time of the giluach, at the time of the shaving for each other. And therefore, if Ruvain says he's a nazir and he's bringing the karbanos when one shaves, and Shimon says the same, so each one could have one set of naziros, and when the other one shaves at the end of the naziros, they bring the karbanos for the other one, and they'll suffice with one set of naziros. If not, they have to bring another set of karbanos. So an interesting din in the Mishnah that someone says a nazir, ve'alai legalech. Ibayilahu asks the Gemara, Shama chaviroi va'amar va'ani. The case in the Mishnah was that the friend heard, and what did the friend say? Ve'alai legaleach nazir. He repeated the exact same thing as the first person. But what if the friend heard and he just said, and I? So is and I saying carbon copy what the first person said, inserted into my mouth, and therefore he's going to be a nazir and have to bring these extra karbanos, or no? Or maybe va'ani is different. Ma'u, what is the din? Explains the Gemara. Va'ani akulad dibura mashma, zani going on the whole thing. Or perhaps apalgit dibura mashma. Or maybe no. Or maybe ani is only going on part of his thing, meaning that he's just saying he wants to be a nazir. It says the Gemara, if you can tell me it's going on a part, which part? I said on a nazir, but which part? Arisha, that he's a nazir. Or yaseh, for the fact that he wants to bring the karbanis. So ask the Gemara fundamental shayla. Someone hears his friend saying two statements, and he yells out, and I, what does that and I do? Does it obligate him, in everything that his friend had to do? Or does the ve'ani only obligate him in part? And if it's part, which part? So says the Gemara, Tashima, let's bring a raya from our Mishnah. What did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said that the friend heard and he said an I, and I'm going to bring the karbanos of a nazir. And the Mishnah said, so explains the Gemara, from the fact that the Mishnah says that in what scenario will the friend have to do both halves, the nazir and the karbanos? If he said both halves, Shema mina, so from there we can infer and bring a proof. Va'ani, if he only said va'ani, abhalga de diburei, he would only be talking about part of his words. From the fact that the Mishnah said va'ani v'alai legalech, and that's when he fully accepted upon himself whatever his friend did, says the Gemara is a proof. If he just said va'ani, he would only be obligated in part. Says the Gemara, great Amri, the Talmid Chacham that were there responded in, you're right. Apalga de dibura mashma. You're right that if someone just says va'a and I, it's going on part of his statement. But now ask the Gemara, mihu areisha yasefa minei. Which part of this statement is it going on? Is it going on the reisha that he's becoming a nazir, or is it going on the seifa that he's valai legaleach nazir? So again, the Gemara brings a proof. Me'tekamar valai legaleach. From the fact that the Mishnah said, Swami to bring a karban nazir to shave shma mina, va'ani, if he just said an I, al tchilas dibura mashma. So the Gemara wants to infer that he said va'ani, ve'alai ligalech. So seemingly the va'ani is going in the first part on the nazir, ve'alai ligalech is going in the second part va'ani ligalech. And from there we'll have a proof if someone just says va'ani, he only accepts upon himself the first part, then his zirus. Amar le Ravuna Braid Rav Yeshua le Rava questions Ravuna to Rava, Mimai, what's your proof? Mimai dahachi. How do you know you just said is accurate? Maybe La'ilam, I'll tell you Imelacha Vani Akula Dibura. I'm going to argue violently on the whole thing you're saying. If someone says Vani, maybe it's going on everything. V'imi sham v'alai. And if you're going to tell me for the fact that the Mishnah said v'alai, my kamar v'alai. What does he mean by v'alai? Baha milsa. You know what he means by v'alai on this matter? So maybe the v'alai is just explaining what the vani is. But really vani in a vacuum could mean what? Could mean the whole thing. And now Rav Huna explains, if you're not going to accept my logic, I have a problem. The Ketani say for the next Mishnah says that we'll learn in tomorrow's daf. So it says, I want to have a half a Nazir. And his friend hears and says the same thing. And I want to bring a Chatzi Nazir. Over there, there's not two things. There's not a Nazir and a Karban Nazir. It's all one entity. And yet the friend says Vani and Alayli Galei Chatzi Nazir. Elamai Ka'amar. So what's the second person saying? Alay Bahamilsa. That means I, and what is on me? What I said, the first thing is explaining the Vani. Hachanami Kikamar Alay Bahamilsa. So says Rav Huna, I'm going to tell you that Vani does not mean half. Vani means whole, and Alai just explains what it is. Says the Gemara, Amar le Rava. Rava holds his own and argues and says, Hachi Ashta. If you're going to tell me in our case, he needed to save Alai, then the Seif, he didn't need to save Alai. Tani Seif Adolai Tzricha, Misham Reisha, the Tzricha. So I understand that the next Mishnah is being said, because of our Mishnah. Really, our Mishnah is the Chiddush. The Valai Galeach is adding on to the Va'ani. And then the next Mishnah says another case. Eli Amr, but the way that you, Rav Huna, are explaining that Reisha Loisricha and Seva Loisricha, that both cases are identical, you didn't really need to say Alai Galeach. Tani Reisha Loisricha, Tani Seva Loisricha. It doesn't make any sense to have two Mishnayos teaching us the exact same thing, both being unnecessary cases, and therefore Rava sticks to his own. The Vanim else mean Palga, which half? Seemingly the first half. We'll pick it up from here the next year. B'siyata Dishmaya.